This video is the third video in the complex number set of videos, and in this video we're going to be looking at complex numbers themselves. Now, complex numbers consist of two parts, a real part and an imaginary part. They are typically written in the form a plus bi, where a is a real number and bi is an imaginary number where I squared is equal to -1. So if we consider the complex number 2 minus 7i, 2 would be the real part, meaning that it isn't the part with the imaginary number. It could be a natural number like 2, it could be an integer, a rational or irrational number. And the 7i is the imaginary part, where the I stands for the square root of -1. In example 3.1, it asks us to find the real part and imaginary part of each complex number in the table. To do this, for the first number we have 8 plus 2i. The real part here is 8 and the imaginary part is 2. For -4 plus 3i, we've -4 for the real part and 3i as the imaginary part. In the next one, the imaginary part is written first. We have -2i minus 7. The real part is -7 and the imaginary part is -2. For the next one, the real part is 2 over 5 and the imaginary part is 1. As, like in algebra, when we have an x with no number in front of it, it's the same as saying 1x. It's the very same with imaginary numbers. If we have an I, it's the same as having 1i. For the next one, we have -i plus 3. So again, the imaginary number is just written first. So this would be -1 for the imaginary part and 3 for the real part. When we have 7i, technically the real part here doesn't exist, or it is 0, and the imaginary part is 7. The same for -6i, so -6 is the imaginary part and 0 is the real part. If we have the square root of 5, here there's no I, and it's not a square root of a negative number. So for here, the real part is square root 5, and the imaginary part is 0. So technically, this wouldn't be a complex number. Looking at the next one, we have the very same. We have -3. This is just a real number, and in particular it's an integer as it's a negative whole number. So the real part here is -3 and the imaginary part is 0. But again, this is not a complex number. The second last one, we have I, and again, that just means that the imaginary part is 1, as I is equal to 1i. And the real part here is 0. And then the last one, we have -i over 9. Now, we can rewrite that as -1 over 9i. It's the very same thing, meaning that the part of the number that's imaginary is the -1 over 9, and there's no real part to this, so it's 0. After watching this video, you should be able to label a real part and the imaginary part of any complex number that you're given. The main thing to note is that when labeling a complex number, A is usually given to the real part and B is usually given to the imaginary part. And as well, it's typical that we write complex numbers A plus BI, where you always write the real part first and the imaginary part second. However, it's not always seen like that, but it's just good practice to write it like that.